I'm Christopher Anadale. I've tracked down some of my former students to ask, is there life after philosophy? Welcome to Life After Philosophy. My guest today is Joey Wolfensberger. He is a full-time faculty member in the Humanities Department at Montgomery College in Maryland. He graduated from Mount St. Mary's University with a bachelor's degree in 2020 with 4 majors in philosophy, theology, sociology, and criminal justice. In 2022, he earned an MA in Philosophical Studies degree from the same institution. He has taught philosophy at Montgomery College, Mount St. Mary's, and University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Joey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
I'm talking to you now as you are on the verge of joining you just have joined the full-time faculty at Montgomery
Correct.
College. So you're moving from part-time sort of adjunct type work into being a permanent part of the faculty there. What's it like?
Yeah, it's really exciting, to be honest. Teaching every day is just a great gift. It's a lot of fun. It's cliche at this point with my students. They would be able to tell you this, but I always say that Mondays are better than Fridays because you have a full week of work to look forward to. Most people can't say that, but I'm very fortunate to be in a kind of vocational profession that I can say that and really enjoy what I do. And so it's a big blessing, and be able to do it full time. Like I said, it's just really exciting. So Montgomery College is a really special college. It's a really special place to be. The faculty are great. The administration is really supportive, and the students are just fantastic. So every day I really do look forward to work. And so being able to do that from part-time to full-time now is really, really exciting. I can't ever state that.
What's particular about community college teaching and community college students? I ask from a position of ignorance because I've not taught that particular cohort or population before. How do you find it's similar and different from the student populations you've taught or been part of yourself?
Yeah, so that's a that's a fantastic question. So community colleges are really unique. So I've had students that were all over the place in terms of just their background, where they were. One thing that's really unique about Montgomery County especially is it's very diverse. And so you get that with various colleges too. You have very diverse populations. But with community colleges too, it's not just diversity in terms of the general demographics, but it's also diverse in terms of where they're coming from. I've had students who are traditional college age, so they come out, right out of high school, 18, 19, 20. I've had students who are dual enrollment, so they were in high school. So they have that as high schools have different worries and different kind of perspectives too. I've had students who are older than my parents, for example. I've had kids that are older than me. That's a really fun dynamic because teaching that generational difference is really, really unique. I've had students who were they went to college and they came back to get a different major, or they were in the workforce for 10, 15 years. They wanted to change their careers. So you just get people from all over with pretty consistent regularity. Every class I have is pretty full of just people all over the place, and that's a really unique group to teach and be with. So that's one thing that's really, I think, distinct from a traditional 4-year school, where you might have more traditional age college students in a 4-year school. But also there's some similarities too, because every school has its own unique student population, and you can have a lot of diverse population. A really diverse population and student body as well from other schools. So there's some similarities there, but the main distinction I would say is that all the time you said people from all over. I actually had a student recently who just graduated from a 4-year school and wanted to go back and take more classes for fun. So it's just kind of so you get that all the time, which is really fun to work with and be with.
What's your experience of students' first encounter with philosophy, given you got people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of different motivations? They walk into a classroom to study philosophy for the first time with you. What's that like, and how do you handle it?
Yeah, so it's kind of fun in a sense where most of my students, vast majority of them, have no prior experience with philosophy. Occasionally you get one student who will, they took philosophy in high school, or maybe their parents are well read and they kind of make them read Plato's Republic for fun. I don't know, but that's kind of more of the rarity. But in any sense, it is a really unique experience. So when a student has their first encounter with philosophy, I think it really depends on what class they take. So I will admit, so if any prospective student is listening to this and they're like, should I take, Professor W's class? For my one-on-one class, I make them read Joseph Pieper, the week one. I kind of make them like the bookends, the beginning and the end. And I say that because when students are first introduced to philosophy and they're taking an introduction to philosophy class and they're reading Joseph Pieper, his lectures on what is philosophy, it's an extremely difficult text. Like I think I first encountered that as an upperclassman essentially in college. So it is a difficult text, and students are, I will admit, tend to be a little bit more frustrated with that at first because it's like, man, this is really hard. But as they kind of read the other kind of texts throughout the semester, we're going into Plato and Aristotle, and you're reading some Augustine and Aquinas, and then they encounter Pieper again at the very end. They really learn a lot. I think a lot of the students, and I get this all the time, a lot of students will say that they just really love philosophy and they're considering taking more philosophy classes. And that's just, that makes my day when I hear that from students of just saying, hey, I took your class, I want to take more philosophy classes. I had a student email me this last spring. I had her in the fall, and she said, it was one of those things where she's like, I wasn't really sure about taking philosophy when I first had it. It was really difficult. I really struggled, which tends to be a common experience. But then, she's like, I'm taking more philosophy classes in the fall again. Like, it's kind of like, yes, yes. Because you really want students to experience that kind of love for philosophy that you and I share as teachers of philosophy. But so it's I think so to put it more succinctly, I think at first it's a pretty difficult because it's a new discipline, right? It's a new kind of thing, and especially if you're reading like Plato and Aristotle, primary sources, people who wrote over 2,000 years ago, it can be really difficult. But when students really take it seriously and put in the work, it really does impact them. They really do. Their outlook on life changes. And that's something you just can't replace with any other kind of discipline, really. That philosophy just, there's just something really unique and fun about it and special. And then when you kind of experience that too, it really motivates you to kind of branch out into the world, and you just don't see it different. You just don't see it the same way. So, yeah, it's hard at first, but it's really impactful later on.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. Let me ask you a more generic question as a colleague. One of the things I see observed a lot across disciplines and across institutions, especially the past, I don't know, 3 or 5 years since lockdown and since the advent of AI, is that students have difficulty with reading and with being motivated to read. And part of that is maybe lack of practice or that the habits of reading have declined. What's been your experience with students and sort of encouraging and getting students to read the things that they really need to read to encounter the ideas that you want them to get in the classroom?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, and I definitely I think every teacher can attest. Post these kind of COVID lockdowns and with the advent of AI, like students' ability to learn. I think it wouldn't be really a far-fetched thing to say that it's really being threatened. It's really difficult for students, I think, to learn, and the temptation to just use AI to write things, or the struggling, just the inability to really to be able to focus and read on these really, albeit difficult texts, right? It is something that is alarming and worrying. And so I think one thing that I would say especially is that teachers have to be really prepared for this. If a teacher isn't necessarily prepared, it's going to be a disaster. Like I've had students have other teachers, not necessarily at the college, but like more in the high school level, that their teachers encourage them to use AI to write things. Like they write a really bad paper. Oh, if it's bad, plug in the AI, will fix it up for you. And it's just kind of like that's not going to teach them anything. And so I really feel for those students. And so teachers really have to be prepared to encounter like students struggling, and they have to be prepared to help them and go out of their way to help them. And this is something I like to do, but it's again it adds extra time on. It's difficult to do for a teacher's perspective, but I really like to offer all my students the ability to send me stuff beforehand just to proofread. And again, there's a certain point where when you have 20 but long page papers, right? There's a certain impossibility to do so. But if they're kind of preemptive enough with it, and they can send you a paragraph or a page or a sentence, right? Or just sit down and talk with you for in office hours, right? Office hours are great for this. This is like the ideal for office hours, right? But to work with the students one-on-one, I think is a really, really indispensable tool to help them. Because when you're able to first of all, encourage them, give them that confidence to be able to really know that they can do it, because a lot of students feel like they can't, they don't have that confidence. And so when you don't have confidence and you struggle, and it's hard, it's easier to give up, right? So when you have that encouragement, so I like to encourage you have to encourage your students. There's no other, you have to believe in your students, right? You have to, but otherwise, like, so with that encouragement, right? Having that confidence to be able to do it, but also work with them one on one. Sit down with them, actually talk to them, walk through, brainstorm with them, walk through it. I find that to be helpful, and students have came back to me and said, "Hey, the assignment's like I assign my papers in parts, so they kind of have to write it in parts. So it's not kind of one of those things where they just wait last." I was a student. I will admit, maybe I should admit it, but I was definitely tend to be more of like the wait till last minute to kind of, okay, I really need to get this done, right? Not a good habit for students, but so when you do it in parts and you're kind of walking with them throughout the paper, the duration of the writing process, it makes it a lot easier. And then they learn how to write an academic paper. Now, not maybe they might graduate and not to write another paper in that sense again, per se, but like that ability to, like, the tool of learning how to write papers. There's more to learn. Like, there's the process itself is like the learning process, right? The paper itself is like the final, it's like a byproduct of the real learning mechanism, right? So I guess I would say, like, especially for teachers, like, you have to, like, open yourself up for your students, like, support them, like, let them know that you believe in them, that you care about them, because then they'll motivate them to, try even harder. But also you have to, like, back it up with action. You have to actually sit down with them, work one on one, and it's going to be more, it's going to take. There are times where I've had students submit me things very, very last minute, and I'm kind of like, well, there's a little bit of like, well, I could let them fail, but, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm gonna, I don't want to do, like, there's things I want to do right now, but you know what, my students are more important than kind of whatever. Like, they're it, right? So you have to kind of back it up with action in there too, and sacrifice some more of your time. Maybe that's kind of outside of office hours in some aspect. Now, if you have, families, that's kind of, harder to do if you have young kids running around, especially. But especially office hours, like office hours, those are really, really unique tools that when students can meet with you in office hours and you can work with them there, real magic happens. Then learning can really, really take off.
Do you think your students leave your classroom with a love of thinking? Because one of the things I've heard said is that reading is a type of thinking and writing is a type of thinking. Do you think your students fall in love with that, or do they have to? Is that the sort of ideal goal that you're going for?
Yeah, so I kind of approach all my classes every semester, every single day, with two kind of major principles. And the first principle that I think is the most important, is I want my students to know that I care about them. I genuinely care about them. I pray for them. I fast for them. I'm like, my students really, when I say the word vocation, right? Like, I really, really do try to be the best possible teacher I could be for my students. And I really do care about not just their, like, academics, doing well academically, but their whole person, right? I want them to thrive. And so I want them to know that, but also, there's a secondary aspect which I want them to know that I love what I'm doing. And so, like, what I'm teaching, I genuinely enjoy talking about. It's not just like, I think everyone can always relate to maybe one teacher you've had in your entire life that was very monotone, like, they point to a board and they speak in, and you don't learn, right? Like, it's just kind of like, it's not fun. Like, Joe, like, does this person even want to be here, right? We live in a culture where people, like, we work a lot, but people don't love their jobs. And that's kind of a really sad culture to be in, right? We want people to, like, really thrive in what they do. And I am very, very, again, fortunate to be at a place where I can be myself and be that, right? And so I think with that kind of attitude, there is something infectious about that, right? Like, and when you're around somebody who, and again, I know in a lot of your kind of podcasts, you have more, I would say, well-spoken guests where they're kind of they say everything that's they're very articulate, right? And I'm kind of a little off the walls personality-wise a little bit. So you could kind of see that how I speak. But there's a reality there that when someone, enjoys what they're doing, they're going to motivate other people to, like, enjoy that same thing too, even if it's not as fun per se, right? My time for philosophy, very first day, I always kind of talk to them about what is philosophy, right? What is this class? Because people don't really know what philosophy is. I ask them, what do you think about philosophy? Like, what are your what are your thoughts going into it? And you get kind of, very, very similar kind of trends, but at the end of the day, right? And again, like, everybody who takes philosophy really ultimately like will know that philosophy is love of wisdom. But what I always like to focus on is the word love, right? We kind of focus on like wisdom, like knowing things, but the word love, right, is really rich because in Greek there's a bunch of different kinds. And Plato says this kind of love of wisdom that philosophers need to have is eros, which is like the impulse in our hearts to take us up to what's good, true, and beautiful, right? That's really what that desire that we really are exploring, right? Because every human being, according to at least Plato and Aristotle, have this desire, right? We just crave goodness, we crave truth, we crave beauty, and these things take us beyond the mere mundane kind of aspects of life, right? Which is why it changes the way you think when you kind of encounter that, right? So when students are able to really encounter that, which is what I want them to encounter, and I believe they encounter that when they know that you believe in them and when they know that you care about what you're saying, they'll take it seriously too, and they're able to like actually have like the groundwork to experience that in a way, it becomes like fertile ground, right? Where they can experience that love too, and when they do that, it's kind of like the jaws of philosophy like grab onto them and it won't let go, right? Like once you experience that, there's no way you can ever go back. And there's no way you would ever want to go back, right? Like it's kind of like Plato's, the allegory of the cave, right? Like once you kind of experience like the light, like you don't want to go back to like just being enchained in the shadows, right? Like there's a little bit of like there's a certain joy in that, right? That you just don't want to lose. And so I think like when students really kind of, again, every class you'll have that too. Like you might have students who, they're only there to kind of check off that box for whatever the thing they have. Like everyone's, it's a standard comic occurrence, right? But when they actually do the readings, they do the assignments, and they actually just pay attention in class. And you even have students who won't even say anything in class, but they'll be like sponges, right? Maybe they'll sit in the back and they'll kind of like just be listening all semester, and then they'll at the very end they'll say something really profound. You're like, where was that also? Like, I was listening, professor. Like, I didn't raise my hand, but like, I was listening. And like, so I find that when students really put in the work, like they actually do this stuff, they buy into it. Like they leave loving philosophy. And I don't know, some students go on, like I'll still I'll get emails from some students every so often, like, hey professor, how are you doing? Like, here's what I'm doing now. I'm studying, I'm off at this new school, 4-year school now, and as a junior, and I'm studying philosophy now, or I went transfer to this school now. I'm studying philosophy, like, and that's just like really cool to like see students like actually like they just carry that with them wherever they go, and that's kind of just been a really fascinating experience to kind of be on the other end. Just it's humbling as a teacher, right, to see your students kind of grow like that. But it's also, I think students who really take it seriously, like it's almost without fail. I think it just naturally happens because we are philosophical creatures who crave goodness, truth, and beauty. When you kind of experience that, it takes you up and up, and sometimes it leads to theology too, right? Like, my 4 years of studying philosophy were kind of in preparation for 2 years of seminary formation. I also made this turned out, right? But like, it doesn't just stop with like the philosophy per se. It can also take into theology too, right? So there's that kind of correlationship there as well. So I think it's a really, really powerful experience for students who really are open to it.
Yeah, it seems like one of the features of being a philosopher, being a genuine philosopher, not just a professor, is that you've got to love your job. If you don't love truth, if you don't love wisdom, don't love your job, you should just leave. Just do something different. Let me ask you about the transition from being a student to being a teacher. It was just 5 years ago that you graduated as an undergraduate, and 3 years ago that you finished your master's degree. And now here you are. You're sort of at the beginning of a lifelong career doing, what I do as a teacher. What's that felt like over time?
Yeah, so I guess right now I feel a little old because of the question. Yeah, I love that because honestly, like it's been a little surreal in a sense where it's like I don't think like reality is really set in yet. Like I'm like actually teaching philosophy. Like it just hasn't set in. But there's also an aspect where it's kind of an easy transition. Like if you love the material, like whatever subject it is, right? Like if you love philosophy or science or mathematics or whatever, right? And you want to become a teacher, well, it's an easy transition because you just are innately attracted to the material you're going to be talking about, right? But it's also a bit like with philosophy. As a philosophy student, and a lot of philosophy students know this, like there's a lot of reading and writing. Like that's part of the humanities, right? In general, like and there's a certain aspect that's really fun there with that, right? Like, I really enjoy reading things that I haven't thought about before. Like it's just been in the last year, like I've just been, oh, it hasn't been necessarily for like a project. It's just been kind of more of just like like an interesting kind of like rabbit hole or for a foray into kind of like knowledge, but like just like reading into like neuroscience, like early human evolution, like it's just kind of like random things that aren't necessarily philosophical, but I'm asking like you study these things and it raises more questions, right? Like it raises so many fun, unique questions about like how we experience so many things, like, and so I'll put like with philosophy, like you're always if you really enjoy like the subject of philosophy, I think you're often going to be attracted to reading more philosophical material, or at least like parallel like disciplines like theology, which I think is that is also something that's very relevant to read. And so I think with like the that aspect, like the reading, and of course like there's always I don't know how it is for someone who's been teaching for more than a few years, like you, like you've been teaching for a while, so you have more experience. So I don't know how it is on the long term scale, but I'm still kind of on the very short end of or the early end of all of this stuff. But like there's always so many things like I want to write about. Like there's so many kind of things I like. I'm like here's my next thing I want to write about, and like I have like a list. It's like you get some parts of this here and there, right? Like it's tough to find time for. That's a kind of struggle in a certain sense. Like I never would have thought I would have missed writing all these papers I did when I was in college. Like that's a weird thing to say. Like I really wish I could write more papers. Like but there is like a certain fun aspect. Like when you do research, like and you're able to like kind of interact with those ideas and like kind of share and express your thoughts about them. Like there's something really fun about them. And so that's been kind of a more of a challenge, I think. College is more of a luxury when you kind of like your job was essentially like to do this stuff, and now kind of like teaching, like maybe part of your job is like you should do more. You should you should be up to date on the research. Like you should be kind of. It's not like you should you stop all that stuff, but so that's like finding time for that or being more intentional with that is probably a bigger challenge jumping into like academia in a sense. But in terms of like the feeling of it, like it's just it's really cool in a sense. Like it's like there's also like a little humility. Like I am pretty young as a I'm in my 20s, so it's like I'm not much like I have so many students who kind of say you're the same age as my sibling. I was kind of like, oh my goodness, like it's like I'm young, right? Like and my first semester teaching was it was January of 2023, and so I think I was only like a few years older than these students, right? At a 4 year school, so it was there is like a little bit of it's interesting because it almost feels like you're a peer in some sense because like age wise you are a peer. Like I'm Gen Z, I'm the same generation as all my students, like most of them at least, and that's kind of an interesting thing to like kind of be a teacher for that. But it also like is a good opportunity to like lead by example in a sense, where like when I assign papers and readings and stuff, I'm also reading and writing with my students. So it's not kind of just like me kind of telling you what to do and then I receive it. It's like I'm here like with you guys. Now maybe it's a little different. Like maybe the things I'm reading and writing about are maybe a little different, but there's still an aspect like I still read Aristotle and I still read like comments. Like there's still like so much I would like every time I read his metaphysics, I learn so much. Same thing with like Nicomachean ethics. Like there's so many things I learn every time I read from these guys. So you kind of like I enjoy going back and rereading a lot of these authors I've read, a bunch of times because you keep learning from more things. There's like something like, oh, I never saw that. Like I didn't like I've read the same passage like 100 times, but like I didn't see the connection here from like from book one to like book eight. Like it's kind of like you're making connections. So it's just cool, right? So it's a really weird feeling. I guess it's surreal in a sense where it's kind of like wow. Definitely like it hasn't set in yet. Maybe in a few years it kind of will sit in or maybe I don't know, maybe not. But there's also like a little bit of kind of like it's a natural transition too, because when you really love something, it's very. I mean, I get paid to talk about things I talk about with friends anyway, so it's kind of like very nice. Like it's fun. And you get to share that kind of passion with others. Like it's. When I first was teaching, I had another kind of mentor faculty member say, like, teaching is the best job in the world because you're essentially like, you get to share what you're passionate about with other people, and that's absolutely true. I've absolutely found that to be true. So, it's been easy and fun in that regard, but it's also been kind of like surreal and like incredible, like to think about, and the other side of things.
Yeah, I found that as well. I like to say that after a few decades of teaching, you feel like a time traveler. You grow older, but everyone else stays the same age. You're still teaching 18 or 20-year-olds, but now you're in your 50s. So now the students I have are younger than some of my own children. That's one of the things you have to look forward to. And I'm sure teachers at all levels experience the same thing. Let me ask you about advice that you might give to current students thinking about maybe taking a philosophy course or picking up a philosophy minor or major. Not everybody's going to expect to really get the bug like you and to sort of jump head first into teaching philosophy as a career and be fortunate enough to get a permanent position at a good school and teaching for a lifetime career. What sort of advice would you give to someone who's sort of philosophy curious right now?
Yeah. So I'll use a more provocative word, but I'll explain why I'll use it. But maybe I'll give a warning. So it's like I would say like the warning is that when you really dive into philosophy, it will change the way you see the world forever. And I think that's a very, very good thing. Like I had four majors, like, and I loved all of them, like criminal justice, sociology, theology, philosophy. They were all great, but there's something like I'm a philosophy teacher. I don't teach like other kind of subjects. Like this is like the discipline I wanted to teach, right? And again, everyone has their kind of like some people might be more inclined towards biology or et cetera, et cetera. But like when you like again, I've never encountered anybody who really dove into philosophy that hasn't really saw things differently. And that's a really awesome thing because you can learn things about discipline X, Y, or Z, and you can apply those things that you learn from discipline X, Y, or Z to a career, right? And that's fantastic. But something about philosophy that it changes, like almost makes you more in touch with your humanity in a certain sense. Like once you kind of experience that draw towards goodness, truth, and beauty, and you actually explore that desire that you have deep within your being, if you were to ask yourself, like, do you have this? Like everybody who's being honest, I think really, really has it. Even people who might say no, like I think like at the very core, like you deeply care about goodness, you care about truth, you care about beauty. These are just you can't escape it. You're human, right? Like this is part of the human nature, human condition, right? But when you kind of start to explore that and you like let that open, like it's going to change the way you see the world and you're never going to go back and you're never going to want to. It's going to change your life for the better in a way that like I think any other discipline really, I don't want to say can't, but like it won't. Like in the same way as philosophy. Philosophy is really unique in this regard. Like philosophy is dedicated to studying that, right? That desire. And so I think so for anyone who's like, should I do this? Like, where maybe I know the whole point, like with this great podcast that you have, is like you talk about people with all different kinds of careers. And of course, mine's a philosophy teacher, and that's kind of maybe the more quote unquote like generic. Like, what do you do with like X degree? Like, you can teach it with it, right? Like, it's kind of like whatever. But like you have so many people who all across different disciplines in your podcast, like that were philosophy majors and minors, right? Like that did not deter them from doing what they're doing now, right? And in fact, they're able to do what they wanted to do before, but now they have this different outlook on life that they just love and appreciate, right? Like, so so I'll say it's a warning. Like if you're really prepared to like really view life in a way that's more in touch with your humanity, philosophy is the discipline to go. If you would rather kind of stay and kind of the mundane stuff and the workday world, right, as Pieper says, maybe philosophy is not for you, but like really philosophy it really is for you because you really have that desire too. And if you were really to be honest, philosophy really changes your life, and I've never heard anybody regret studying philosophy who studied it. Personally, for me, that's anecdotal, but there is that kind of aspect that when people really have their lives changed, especially for the better, and you can't undo the way that you think. Like once you like are exposed to a new way of like your brain is opening up, right? Your mind's opening up. Like it's absolutely incredible. And I teach this, so I get to share that with my students, which is awesome. But philosophy, like majors, minors, wow, even if you just take one class, right? Like or two class, like it changes the way you think, and it's just awesome. So that's why I have to say that because it's such an awesome experience. Just taking a philosophy class, and then if you want to do that for a major or a minor, like imagine spending 4 years studying that, right? Like you'll never see the world differently, and that's such a gift, such a gift.
That's awesome. That's going to go on the advertisement. That's just what we need to hear. Although it's maybe what people are more suspicious of and frustrated with is not philosophy, but bad philosophy, and not philosophy teachers, but bad philosophy teachers. That's sort of entered the culture as a cliche. You're one of the good ones. And I've spoken to a lot of people on this podcast who have had plenty of good philosophy experiences and experiences that are not predictable, really. There's something open ended about philosophy study, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's a point too. Like, I definitely heard concerns from people. Like, be at some school and I had someone was telling me their kid went to a college or they studied philosophy class, and the first day, like, their teacher said Aristotle. You don't need to read Aristotle. Who cares about, like, threw him out. There's a little bit of like I'm so like they're so you're gonna have always like there's always gonna be philosophers who are gonna be able to expose maybe do a better or less good job at like allowing you to kind of experience that for sure. Like you have in every profession, right? You have people who every profession do really well, do good, do okay, or do poorly. Like it's kind of, but like I think there's also this notion of if someone is worried about that genuinely, like has a genuine worry. And again, my maps degree, I studied a lot of what I studied was human Nietzsche, and I'm not necessarily like a Hume or Nietzsche kind of like I don't see the world the same way as human Nietzsche did, right? So there's a little bit of these guys have had ideas that were very different than how I personally saw the world at the time and see the world even now after reading that, right? But there's a certain aspect of you kind of if you're really well grounded yourself, you're gonna be able to like discern that. So like you're gonna be able to like look at is what they're saying actually consistent with my experiences? Are they really like leading me like to what's good, true, and beautiful? Or they lead me away from that, right? And so I think like a really discerning eye can do that. And I think a lot of people, especially some Gen Z, I'll give a shout out to Gen Z. I think Gen Z is very good at that too. Like younger people are very good at like discerning like is this person really enjoy like is this person a witness or is this person just kind of talking to talk, right? I think young people are really good at kind of discerning that, right? And so, having that discerning eye is important, and you're going to have that regardless, right? Because in reality, everyone's a human, and all humans have this desire, and all humans, in a sense, here are philosophers, right? So you have 8 billion people here, and you have a bunch of different worldviews in the world, even today, in our own culture, right? That are might be good or bad, right? Like, or maybe get some things mixed, right? Like in reality. So, we have to naturally have a discerning eye, anyways. There's a little bit you have to kind of like test everything, right? And then whenever something's good, you latch onto it, right? When something's bad, you can throw it away, or at the very least, you can engage with it and explain why it's not good, right? So, I mean, part of the fun for me is like the devil's advocate stuff, anyways, like the kind of bad philosophy, quote unquote, because it actually forces me to understand the good philosophy even better and respond to it, which is a skill set that it's just important, just in life, I think. So all of us, like every person, like I think it was Monsignor Sokolowski from Catholic U. I read him, forget one of the classes I'm out, but he said that everyone was a material heretic, but very few people are formal heretics. That's where like, if you question somebody enough about some issue enough, like question, eventually someone's going to say something wrong. Everyone's going to say something wrong, objectively, right? So there's a little bit of kind of saying, well, we have to kind of constantly reform ourselves and kind of just grow as people in our own life, right? Like kind of shed the things that aren't so good and kind of keep growing towards what is good. And so if I get like the word about bad philosophy, like read the syllabus, like you can kind of know like who are these thinkers, what are their ideas, what are they saying, are these things consistent with my experiences, are these things consistent with what I know is good, true, and beautiful? If so, like jump in. If not, well, why not? Like, why are we reading these thinkers? Are they there to? Like, you can ask more questions, right? And before you know it, you're going to be doing philosophy in order to like discern whether or not you like. Again, every teacher has their own kind of preferences and orientations too. Like the way I teach is going to be different the way you teach. Maybe we teach the same thinkers, right? But maybe our presentation is going to be different, right? Maybe we're going to have slightly different thinkers or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, like for someone who's really in touch with their own kind of humanity in that sense, and I'm not. I would hope that most teachers are in that sense. Like we're really seeking the good, true, and beautiful, and we're all on the same team in kind of that sense. Now, again, if someone's worried about like the syllabus of their readings or something, okay, be grounded. Like if you're well grounded, you'll be fine. Like you can navigate through ideas that you disagree with. Like the goal of philosophy isn't to kind of always just hear what you want to hear too. Like that's kind of also not going to help you grow. You need to be challenged a little bit too. Challenged with good sources, but you also apologetics isn't like a bad kind of part of theology either. That's an important part of theology, right? But there's also the kind of aspect where apologists need to kind of interact with bad arguments all the time. And so they're formed by good arguments too. Like they know what's good, but they aren't afraid of what's bad too. So there's that kind of discernment aspect that is necessary, and discernment also helps you grow too. So don't just kind of roll it out because you're like to be afraid of like, oh, this school has a reputation, or this. Look at the syllabus. Look at the syllabus. See what? Talk to the professor, right? Have a conversation. like it, but like, but philosophy really is, I think, for everybody. Everyone can do philosophy, and everyone does philosophy without even realizing it. And so, I don't know if I would address any potential listener's fear about having a bad philosopher, but I really do think like that there is a good like you want to be well formed. Like formation always should be good. And unfortunately, like there's plenty of philosophers in throughout the history of philosophy that weren't good philosophers, like pseudo philosophers, if you will. But you can tell because like their ideas weren't leading people to what's good, true, and beautiful. It wasn't leading them to being more in touch with like what it means to be human. It kind of led them to kind of destroy humanity and like the kind of human nature in that sense. And so you can have a discerning eye, and you can also have a lot of there's plenty of good philosophy out there too. And so and if someone's a Mount student, like the Mount philosophy program, this is a shameless plug, but the Mount does have a very good philosophy program. I very much enjoyed my many years there, and all the faculty there were phenomenal. So I would not be worried about the Mount if I was a prospective student. But and Montgomery College is good too. I'm plugging my own school, but
Yeah, that's fine. The check's in the mail, Joey.
yeah.
That's wonderful. Very insightful. I really appreciate that. My guest today on Life After Philosophy has been Professor Joey Wolfensberger of Montgomery College, Maryland. Joey, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Life After Philosophy. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate it 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. I appreciate your support.